Hey, welcome back to Crosswork Reviews. This video is going to be a little bit different because today I'm going to be comparing the somewhat recent 2018 Grinch movie to the live action one, how they compare to the original movie from 1966, and see which one is the better Grinch movie.
Okay, Max, hit the intro.
First, let's talk about maybe why both of these movies were made, which will potentially shed some light on some of the other decisions throughout each movie. From what I've gathered, Ron Howard, the director of the 2000 live action film, thought that the character of Cindy Lou, who is a very small part in the original story, had the potential to add a lot of quality and a lot of heart to a live action adaptation, which she does. And I would argue that in the final film, her character is one of the best aspects out of any of these adaptations. So the goal of this movie was to not only have a live action version of the story, but to also bring more depth to both the Grinch and also to the Who's, who aren't as relevant in the original tale. And then for the 2018 movie, they probably considered that the live action movie doesn't really feel like a kid's movie. A little bit more on that later. So Universal was probably just wanting a version of the Grinch that was not only more current, but also more friendly for families and younger kids, because it's much more lighthearted, both in the quality of the story and in the visuals, and it tells a slightly more standard story. Speaking of visuals, how these movies look is obviously the biggest difference between the two, but it's definitely worth discussing. Personally, and I will probably get some flack for this, I think that the production design and the overall look of the live action movie represents Dr. Seuss's style a little bit more, at least in terms of if a Dr. Seuss story were translated to live action. Yes, this movie does have a much grittier feel, and a lot of its shots could be taken from a horror movie. But because it's live action, they had to try as hard as they could to make it look like Dr. Seuss's style. The makeup and the hair is really well done, and it makes it drastically stand out from any other movie that I know of.
$20 says he's going to talk about lighting.
However, I do think that this movie is a little bit too dark visually, and I think that it would benefit more from a more cheery and musical style of lighting design. In the 2018 version, even though it is much more well lit and a little bit more vibrant, it looks a bit more just like a standard animated movie with a mix of illumination style with a seasoning of Dr. Seuss's look. And the Who's in the animated version don't look very Who-ish to me. In comparison, the Horton Hears a Who movie made by Blue Sky, the same folks that did Ice Age, made a world and characters that look way more like the original source material from the books. I mean, how did we go from this to something like this? Kind of feels like we're downgrading a bit. But to be fair, the animated kids movie industry is very saturated right now, so Illumination would have had to lose some of their signature look to actually stand out from the crowd. But the one thing about both of these movies that I think matched very well is the design of the buildings and the architecture, both in the animated and the live action versions. They have that swirly door and a lot of the crazy architecture and stuff that makes Dr. Seuss feel like Dr. Seuss, and I think that they both translated that part really well. I will give the animated Grinch, at least the character, a point because he does look a lot more like the original 1966 animated version, which it should, because unless you hire somebody who is unhealthily proportioned for a live action role like this, especially a Dr. Seuss character, you're always going to get more accurate results when you're translating from 2D animation to 3D.
Unhealthily proportioned? Why, thank you.
Now I'd like to talk about the characters of both Cindy Lou Who and the Grinch, which I think will help define which one of these movies is the better film. In both the animated and the live action versions of the movie, Cindy Lou Who has very different motives behind her character. In the 2018 version, she wishes that her mom would not need to work as hard in providing for her family and being a single mom, and this is her wish to Santa. This motive is very thoughtful and very realistic. But I do think that Cindy Lou Who's level of maturity and cockiness felt a little bit unrealistic, and she seems smarter than all of the other adults in the movie, which kind of took me out of it a bit. This is a common trait in kids' movies nowadays, so it just felt a bit unoriginal and unbelievable. She also has very little involvement with the Grinch compared to the live-action movie, which made her and the Grinch's stories feel a little bit disconnected. In the live-action film, her motive is more about finding the true meaning behind Christmas, at least in a secular way, and also strives for the Grinch to be redeemed and for him to find happiness in Christmas. Plus, when she stands up for the Grinch in front of the whole town, this helps show everyone what the result of kindness can be and helps them look beyond themselves.
Kindness? Don't make me sick.
And now in regards to the Grinch's character, in the 2018 movie, this Grinch is definitely the most friendly version of all three. He feels less evil and more like a grouchy and mean person who just wants to stay away from everyone and Christmas. Benedict Cumberbatch does voice him well, but his voice feels a little bit more common and not as unique, at least as a Grinch, which I think makes his whole character feel a little bit more subdued. However, Jim Carrey's Grinch, who is definitely not subdued, is much more evil and I think is a slightly closer representation, at least emotionally, to the original 1966 version, as well as embodying the disgusting person that the classic song sings about.
Of course my heart's in a big hole. I like it that way.
He despises Christmas as well as all of the Who's and actually has a bad reputation down in Whoville. Everyone knows about him, opposed to the 2018 version where it seems like only one guy knows who he is and everybody else ignores him. When looking at the full story arc of both Grinches, I think that the live-action one grows more as a character. Because he starts so evil, he has to change much more opposed to Cumberbatch's Grinch. But it is a different growth because Cumberbatch's goes from grouchy mean to a nice guy, while Jim Carrey's goes from evil to someone who still has a rocky personality but who wants to do good now. But I think the biggest difference in their arc is at the end when he has to save the sleigh from almost falling off the cliff. In both the 1966 and the 2000 version, the fact that his heart grows 2 sizes is why he's able to save the sleigh, of course with the help of his dog.
Oh, Max.
But in the 2018 version, he's not able to save it, and instead a reindeer family and his dog save him and the sleigh, which I think kind of depreciates the impact of the Grinch's change in his character. And here's just a little bit of something that I don't like about each film. Even though I do really like Jim Carrey and I think that he's hilarious throughout the movie, I do think that his performance at times, as well as a few other sequences throughout the movie, are way more crass than they need to be and that the story deserves. Nothing about Dr. Seuss's stories strike me as being off color in terms of suggestive humor, so I don't see why this movie decided to include so many small aspects that make this film a little bit more of an adult movie. In regards to the 2018 version, even though a lot of the humor was really funny and clever, some of it felt a little bit pushed, as in they would set up a joke just for the sake of having a joke and then they wouldn't commit to it. For example, while the Grinch, Max, and the reindeer are walking through the snow, every step is very loud, and he says that this is the loudest snow that he's ever heard. But after that shot, the snow suddenly gets quiet. I think if you're going to make a joke about the snow being crunchy and loud, in my opinion, you should keep the snow crunchy for at least the rest of the scene to make the joke consistent. There's still a few of nitpicky things that I could talk about, but to wrap up this video, here's my opinion in short. I think that if Dr. Seuss were presented with both remakes, he would probably choose the 2018 film. Even if it doesn't go as deep emotionally as a live-action movie, its family-friendly aspects and lighthearted feel make it much more attractive to a wider audience, and I think portray that more lighthearted feel that his stories typically go for. But I do think that the live-action movie, especially in a vacuum, is a much better film. It's more heartfelt and it goes much deeper into its story, and I think that the characters, obviously with the help of it being live-action, are much more grounded and it's easier to feel and relate to them. So in case you haven't noticed, I do like the live-action one more. The new one is fine, but it's kind of a bore. But that's the nice thing about movies. Regardless of which one you like, even if... No, don't touch it! Oh!
Even though my film is better, then I guess it's okay if you like the other one. Merry Christmas.
Oh, look! It's about time to wallow in self-pity. I'll see you later, folks. I got a busy day.